I never imagined that at 36 years old I would find myself standing in a glittering ballroom wearing a dress that was supposed to make me feel beautiful, and instead feeling like the loneliest woman in the world. I am a wife, or at least I thought I was, and for more than a decade I devoted myself to a man who I believed was my partner, my anchor, my forever. His name is Daniel, and for years he had been both my comfort and my undoing. The wedding was supposed to be a joyous occasion, my younger sister's big day, a chance to watch her walk down the aisle and promise her heart to the man she loved. I had spent weeks helping her prepare, staying up late to finalize flowers, calming her tears. When the pressure grew heavy and trying to remind her that love could still be beautiful even after all the disappointments I had endured, I thought I was strong enough to witness it, to smile through my own scars. But nothing could have prepared me for the storm that awaited me that night. From the very beginning of the reception, I felt Daniel's distance. He moved through the crowd like a stranger wearing the mask of my husband, his eyes lingering on my sister far too long, his jokes edged with a cruelty only I seemed to notice. When he spoke to me, it was sharp, dismissive, a tone that cut me down in front of others. I brushed it off, told myself I was imagining things, but deep down a knot twisted tighter with every passing hour. Then came the moment that shattered me. The best man had just finished his toast, and the room was buzzing with laughter and champagne. Daniel rose from his chair, glass in hand, and before I could stop him, he clinked his glass and drew the attention of the entire room. His words began innocently enough, a playful jab at married life, but quickly turned into something darker. He made a joke about me, about my weight, my inability to keep up, about how I had become more of a nagging mother than a wife. The room erupted in awkward laughter, some trying to brush it off, others looking down at their plates. My sister's face burned red with embarrassment, and my parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. And I sat frozen, every nerve in my body screaming, but my lips unable to move. He humiliated me in front of my family, my friends, strangers who would carry this memory long after the wedding was over. It wasn't just a joke, it was a betrayal, a deliberate act meant to remind me of my place, to strip me of dignity on a night that wasn't even mine. I excused myself, fleeing to the bathroom, where I locked the door and pressed my trembling hands against the sink. My reflection stared back at me, hollow-eyed and broken. I thought of all the years I had given him, all the sacrifices I had made to keep our marriage alive. I thought of the nights I stayed awake while he stumbled in late, of the excuses I made to cover his absences, of the way I bent myself small to fit into the shrinking space of his love. And still it wasn't enough. But something shifted in me that night. As I wiped my tears and reapplied lipstick with shaking hands, a thought rose from the depths of my pain, a secret I had carried quietly, one I never intended to use. My sister, the radiant bride, was pregnant, and few people knew. She had confided in me weeks earlier, terrified that her groom might not react the way she hoped, and I had promised to guard her secret until she was ready. But now, as I stood alone in that bathroom, I realized that secrets hold power, and sometimes power is the only weapon left to those who have been humiliated. When I returned to the table, Daniel was laughing, basking in the discomfort he had created, feeding off the nervous energy of those too polite to confront him. My heart pounded as I leaned close enough that only he could hear, and whispered the truth about my sister's pregnancy into his ear. His smile faltered. His glass trembled. For the first time in a long time, he was the one caught off guard. That whisper was not just revenge, it was survival. It was me reclaiming a piece of the dignity he tried to steal. And in that moment, I knew everything was about to change. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I saw Daniel watching my sister with a new kind of intensity, confusion flickering in his gaze. I saw my sister laughing nervously, unaware of the storm I had just unleashed. And I saw myself standing on the edge of a choice that would alter the course of my life forever. As the music played and the guests danced, I moved through the room like a ghost, replaying every wound Daniel had ever given me, weighing them against the secret I had just revealed. Part of me ached with guilt for dragging my sister's truth into the battlefield of my marriage, but another part, the part that had been silenced for too long, felt alive for the first time. When the night ended and we returned home, the silence between us was thick with unspoken words. Daniel didn't look at me, didn't touch me. I could feel his anger radiating, but beneath it, there was fear, too. He knew I had more power than he thought. He knew I was no longer the woman who would sit quietly while he tore me apart. That night, lying awake in the dark, I asked myself who I had become. A wife, a fool, a warrior. Perhaps all three. But I also asked myself what came next. Because one whisper, one act of defiance was only the beginning of a war I never wanted but could no longer avoid. The morning after the wedding, the air between Daniel and me was heavier than stone. He moved through the kitchen in silence, pouring himself coffee without offering me any. His jaw clenched tight enough to break. I sat at the table, my hands wrapped around an untouched mug, staring at the faint reflection of my face in the dark liquid. Neither of us spoke, but the echo of my whisper still vibrated between us. He knew that I knew something dangerous, and I knew he would not forgive me for using it. Hours passed like years. I tried to distract myself with laundry dishes, meaningless tasks that never truly quieted the storm inside me. My thoughts kept circling back to the look on his face at the wedding, his smugness crumbling into panic when I leaned in and whispered about my sister's pregnancy. For years he had controlled the narrative, deciding when I was the joke, when I was small, when I was the silent wife who endured. But that one moment shifted the balance, and he hated me for it. By late afternoon, the silence broke. "You had no right," he said, his voice low but sharp. He didn't look at me. He stared out the window, his knuckles white on the edge of the counter. I swallowed hard, my voice trembling as I asked, "And you had the right to humiliate me, to make me the punchline at my own sister's wedding?" His head snapped toward me, eyes blazing. "That was a joke. You're too sensitive." I laughed bitterly. A joke. Watching my parents avoid my eyes while everyone else laughed at my expense. Watching my sister, the bride, shrink with embarrassment because my husband couldn't resist tearing me down. He said nothing, but his silence was an admission. I stood, my hands shaking, but my spine straighter than it had been in years. "You think you hold the power here, Daniel, but you don't. Not anymore." One whisper reminded you of that. The words tasted like fire, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in him. A man who had built his strength on my submission, suddenly realizing his foundation was cracked. But power is never surrendered willingly. Over the weeks that followed, Daniel fought back in subtle ways. He was colder, sharper, his criticisms more cutting, but always behind closed doors where no one else could witness. At family gatherings, he played the devoted husband, smiling and holding my hand, while his eyes burned with resentment only I could read. It was a dangerous game, one where appearances mattered more than truth, and I was tired of being the pawn. Then came the twist I hadn't anticipated. One evening, my sister called me in tears. "He knows," she whispered. "My husband knows about the baby." I didn't tell him yet, I was waiting for the right time, but somehow he knows. My heart dropped. The secret I had weaponized had slipped further than I ever intended. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, my stomach turning. "Did Daniel say something?" She hesitated. "He was acting strange at the wedding. He asked me weird questions yesterday. Please tell me you didn't." Her voice broke and I couldn't answer. Silence was my confession. Why, she cried. "Why would you use me like that?" Tears stung my eyes. "I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go beyond him. He humiliated me and I—" "You always make it about you!" She snapped, her voice full of venom I had never heard before. "This was my moment, my wedding, my marriage, and you turned it into your battlefield." The call ended abruptly and I sat in the dark, trembling, realizing that my revenge had cost me more than I expected. I had wanted to hurt Daniel, to remind him that I wasn't powerless, but in the process, I had wounded the one person who had trusted me most. Days turned into weeks and the tension only grew. My sister avoided me. My parents sensed something but didn't press, and Daniel seemed almost gleeful in my isolation. He had found a way to twist my act of defiance into proof of my recklessness, my selfishness. He didn't need to say it out loud. I could see it in his smirk when my sister ignored my calls, in the way he leaned back in his chair as if victory was already his. But I refused to let him win. One night, I went searching through the boxes, in the attic boxes Daniel thought I had forgotten about. Inside were journals I had kept through the years, entries documenting every fight, every cruel word, every betrayal I had endured in silence. I flipped through the pages, reliving the pain, and as I read, a realization took root. My whispers didn't have to be secrets traded in the dark. My voice could be louder, stronger, undeniable. I began writing again, this time not just for myself, but with purpose. I wrote about the wedding, about the humiliation, about the whisper that had cracked everything open. I wrote about the years of small betrayals, the loneliness of loving a man who thrived on my pain, the weight of carrying his cruelty alone. Each word was a brick in the wall I was building between us, a barrier that protected me from his manipulation. But with every page, I also asked myself the hardest question. Was revenge enough? Hurting him had given me a fleeting sense of power, but the aftermath left me hollow, estranged from my sister, weighed down by guilt. What I truly wanted wasn't just revenge, it was freedom. The next confrontation came sooner than I expected. We were sitting at dinner, the air heavy with unspoken anger, when Daniel finally sneered, "You think you're clever, don't you? Using your sister's little secret against me? But you forget I can destroy you whenever I want." I put down my fork, my hands steady for once. "You already tried. And all you did was remind me that I don't need you to survive." His smirk faltered, and for a fleeting moment I saw the truth. He wasn't afraid of my whisper. He was afraid of my strength. That night, as I lay awake, I thought of my sister's words, her anger, her pain. I thought of Daniel's threat, his need for control. And I thought of myself, not the woman he mocked at the wedding, not the wife he belittled, but the woman who had endured, who had found her voice, even in the darkest room. Revenge had been the spark, but freedom would be the fire. And I knew deep in my bones that the time was coming when I would no longer whisper, I would roar. The days blurred into weeks, and yet the sting of that night clung to me like smoke that refused to clear. My sister still wouldn't answer my calls. Every time I saw her name on my phone screen with the word missed beneath it, guilt pierced me again. The silence between us was louder than any scream. Daniel had managed to twist my desperate act of survival into something poisonous, and for the first time in my life, my sister looked at me as though I were the betrayer. I wanted to hate him for it, and I did, but I also hated myself for letting him drive me to use her secret. I had broken something sacred between us, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. Daniel, on the other hand, was thriving in the chaos. He walked around the house with a smug ease, the kind of confidence that comes from believing he has outplayed everyone else. He knew my sister was angry with me. He knew my parents were confused by the tension. And he knew that I was isolated, trapped between my shame and his mockery. One evening, as I set dinner on the table, he leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of wine like he was hosting a victory toast. "You see what happens when you try to fight me," he said casually, as if we were discussing the weather. "You lose everyone, one by one." His words sliced through me, but I forced myself not to flinch. "No, Daniel. I lost them because I trusted you once. Because I let you humiliate me until I had nothing left but a whisper." He smirked, taking a slow sip. "And look where that whisper got you. Alone." I wanted to scream, to throw the glass across the room, to let my rage burn everything to ash. But instead, I breathed deeply and remembered the journals in the attic, the years of truth I had documented. He thought I was powerless because I had kept my pain hidden. But silence wasn't the same as weakness. That night, after he had fallen asleep, I pulled the journals out again. I read page after page, remembering the girl I had been at 25 when we married, so full of hope. I remembered the first cruel joke he made in front of friends, how I laughed along to mask my humiliation. I remembered the birthdays he forgot, the holidays he ruined, the countless little betrayals that had chipped away at me until I no longer recognized myself in the mirror. But buried among those entries were also notes of clarity, moments when I had caught a glimpse of my own strength, even if fleeting. A reminder that I had not always been this woman, bent and silent. I had been fierce once, and I could be again. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. My parents invited us over for dinner, hoping to ease the tension in the family. I didn't want to go, but I also didn't want them to feel trapped in the crossfire. When we arrived, my sister was there, her stomach beginning to show beneath her dress. She avoided my eyes, her smile brittle, but her presence was enough to make my pulse quicken. Dinner was tense, every conversation strained, but the real eruption came when my sister finally snapped. "Why did you tell him?" she demanded, her fork clattering against her plate. The room went silent, every head turning toward me. I opened my mouth, but Daniel was faster. He set down his glass and said smoothly, "Because she can't keep anything to herself. Because she needed to hurt someone after I made a harmless joke." "Harmless," I choked out. My voice cracked, but my anger gave me strength. "You humiliated me. You've humiliated me for years." And yes, I whispered her secret, but not to the world, only to you. "And you used it to poison everything." My sister's eyes filled with tears. "So it's true. You told him." "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I was drowning. He wanted to destroy me, and I reached for the only thing I had. I never meant for it to hurt you." Daniel leaned back, smiling like the devil watching a soul burn. "This is what she does," he said to my family. "She twists everything, plays the victim, but in the end, she's the one who ruins it all." Something inside me snapped. For too long, I had let him own the narrative. For too long, I had let him spin me into the villain while he wore the mask of charm. But not anymore. I stood my chair, screeching against the floor. My voice shook, but it rose strong. "No more. You want to talk about the victim? You want them to see the truth?" I turned to my parents, my sister, my whole family. For years, he's torn me down. He's made me small in every room. He humiliated me in front of you all at the wedding, knowing I would sit silent. He thrived on my pain. And when I finally pushed back, when I whispered something I never should have, he twisted it into proof that I'm the monster. Tears blurred my vision, but I kept going. I am not the monster here. I am a woman who has been broken and mocked and betrayed, and I will not be silent anymore. The room was deathly quiet. My sister stared at me, her expression unreadable. My parents looked stunned, caught between disbelief and dawning recognition. Daniel, for the first time in years, looked unsettled. His smirk faltered. My sister's voice broke the silence. "You should have come to me," she whispered. "Not him. Me." I know I said, my chest aching, and I will regret it every day. But I will not regret standing up to him, not anymore. The rest of the dinner collapsed into silence. When we left, Daniel's fury was palpable. He slammed the car door so hard it rattled the frame. "Do you think they believe you?" he hissed. "Do you think anyone will ever see you as anything but pathetic?" I turned to him, calm in a way that surprised me. "I don't care what they see. I know who you are. And now so do they." That night, I packed a small bag. I didn't leave, not yet, but I needed to feel the weight of the decision in my hands. I needed to remember that staying was no longer the only option. For the first time in years, I slept without fear, because I knew the war wasn't over. It was only beginning. The days after that dinner felt like walking on shards of glass. Every step, every word, every breath was painful. My sister still kept her distance, but I noticed something had shifted. When we passed each other in the grocery store, she didn't turn away this time. Her eyes met mine for a brief moment, and in them I saw hurt, yes, but also recognition, maybe even the faint beginning of understanding. Daniel, on the other hand, was unraveling. The smug confidence he had once carried so effortlessly began to crack. I noticed it in the way he flinched when his phone buzzed, the way he drank more heavily at night, the way his temper erupted over the smallest things. He was afraid, though he would never admit it. Afraid that I had more power than he thought. Afraid that his facade was beginning to crumble. And he was right to be afraid. One evening, while he was passed out on the couch, with an empty glass in his hand, I found myself scrolling through his phone. I had resisted this temptation for years, always telling myself that trust was sacred, even when he had shredded it long ago. But that night, something in me broke. I needed to know what else he was hiding. The truth came quickly in the form of messages that made my stomach lurch. They weren't recent, some were months old, but they were damning. Flirtatious texts with another woman, late-night promises, even photos. My hands shook as I scrolled, bile rising in my throat. All those nights he had come home late, smelling of cologne that wasn't mine. I had known. Deep down, I had known. And now the proof was right here in front of me. I closed the phone quietly, my heart pounding in my ears. The betrayal burned, but beneath the pain was something else: relief. Relief that I wasn't crazy. Relief that all the gaslighting, all the dismissals, all the nights he told me I was imagining things, it had all been lies. I had been right all along. The next morning, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I wanted time. Time to think, to plan, to decide how to use this truth. Because I had learned one thing in the fire of our marriage: timing is everything. A week later, my parents invited us over again. This time, my sister came too. Her belly was fuller now, her glow unmistakable. She didn't smile at me, but she didn't glare either. It was progress, however fragile. Dinner was tense as always, but halfway through, Daniel decided to strike. He raised his glass, a smirk tugging at his lips. "I think we should toast," he said smoothly. "To family, to honesty, to loyalty." His eyes cut toward me sharp as knives. I felt my stomach twist, but I forced myself to meet his gaze. My voice was steady when I said, "Then let's be honest. Let's talk about loyalty." The table went silent. My parents looked between us nervously, my sister's fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Daniel chuckled, trying to brush it off. "Oh, here we go. She loves her dramatics." But I didn't back down. I pulled out my phone, opened the messages I had saved, and set it on the table. Dramatic. These look pretty clear to me. His face went pale. For the first time in years, Daniel was the one exposed, cornered, stripped of his mask. He reached for the phone, but my sister snatched it up first. Her eyes widened as she read, her lips tightening with every word. "How long?" she asked coldly, her voice sharp as steel. Daniel stammered. It was nothing, just flirting. It didn't mean—" "Don't you dare," I cut in. My voice shook, but I pressed on. "Don't you dare minimize it. I have spent years drowning in your cruelty, your lies, your betrayals. You humiliated me at a wedding that wasn't even ours. You mocked me in front of everyone I love. And now finally they get to see who you really are." My sister set the phone down like it was poison. My parents stared at Daniel in shock, my mother's hand clutching her chest. My father's jaw was clenched, his knuckles white against the tablecloth. "You wanted honesty," I said, my eyes locked on him. "Here it is. You are a liar, a cheater. And for years you made me feel like I was the problem, like I was crazy. But I am done. Do you hear me? I am done." The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Daniel's face was red with fury, his chest rising and falling like a caged animal. But there was no coming back from this, not this time. We left in separate cars that night. He slammed the door and stormed out without a word. I drove home alone, tears streaming down my face, not of grief, but of release. For the first time, I felt the weight of his control lifting. Later that night, as I sat alone in the quiet of our bedroom, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my sister. "Just 5 words, I believe you, I'm sorry." I clutched the phone to my chest and sobbed, because even though I had lost so much, I realized I was beginning to gain something back. My voice, my truth, my freedom. The next day, I started packing. Not everything, just enough to remind myself that I could leave. A suitcase in the corner waiting for me, whispering of possibility. Daniel raged when he saw it, accusing me of overreacting, threatening me with financial ruin, begging me to think of appearances. But I didn't falter. For years I had been the silent one, the woman who stayed small so he could feel big, the wife who swallowed her pain to keep the peace, but not anymore. The war wasn't over. But for the first time I wasn't afraid of it. I was ready. The suitcase stayed in the corner of the bedroom, like a silent witness to my awakening. Every morning I saw it, and every night I touched its handle before bed. It reminded me that I had a choice, that I was no longer bound by his humiliation, no longer chained to his betrayal. Daniel, of course, tried every weapon he had left. He alternated between rage and charm, between venom and apology. One night he screamed so loudly the neighbors banged on the wall. The next he brought flowers and tried to slide them across the table, like they could erase years of cruelty. But each attempt only revealed the truth more clearly. He wasn't sorry for what he had done. He was sorry that I had finally stopped accepting it. The turning point came on a Sunday afternoon. My sister invited me over, her eyes softer now, her belly round with the child she once feared to announce. We sat together on her porch, the autumn leaves swirling around us. For the first time since the wedding, she reached for my hand. I was angry, she whispered. But I see now what he's done to you. And I should have seen it sooner. Tears welled in my eyes. I'm sorry for using your secret. I hated myself for it the second the words left my mouth. But he pushed me past breaking. I didn't know how else to survive. She squeezed my hand tighter. You don't have to survive him anymore. You can leave. The words lingered in the air, simple but life-altering. You can leave. That night, I stood in the bedroom staring at the suitcase. Daniel was in the living room muttering to himself over the television. My heart pounded, my hands trembling as I finally unzipped the bag and began filling it with clothes. Each folded shirt was a piece of myself reclaimed, each pair of shoes a step closer to freedom. When I wheeled the suitcase into the hallway, Daniel noticed. His eyes widened, his face flushing red. What the hell do you think you're doing? I'm leaving, I said quietly, though my voice carried more strength than it ever had before. He laughed, a cruel sound. Don't be ridiculous. You won't last a week without me. I met his gaze steadily. I've lasted years with you. That was the hard part. Leaving will be easy. His face contorted with rage. But I didn't stop. I walked to the door, suitcase rolling behind me, my heart thundering. For the first time in years, his words didn't bind me. His threats didn't chain me. His voice didn't drown me. I opened the door and stepped into the night. The cool air hit my face like baptism, washing away the years of silence. I walked to my car, loaded the suitcase, and drove. The days that followed were not easy. Freedom rarely is. I stayed with my sister. At first, her forgiveness a balm I didn't deserve but needed desperately. My parents visited often, their quiet support steadying me in ways words never could. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I had done the right thing, if starting over at 36 was too late, if the scars Daniel left would ever truly fade. But each morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through windows that no longer framed his shadow. Each morning I breathed easier, and each morning I reminded myself I chose this, I chose me. Months passed and the divorce papers were filed. Daniel fought, of course he threatened, he lied, he painted me as unstable. But this time, I had proof. Journals, messages, years of documentation. And more importantly, I had my voice. The woman who once whispered in desperation now spoke with clarity, with conviction, with power. The final hearing was surreal. I sat across from him in the courtroom, his suit wrinkled, his charm gone stale. When the judge read the final decree granting me freedom, I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I simply closed my eyes and let the weight lift from my shoulders. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in years. My sister was waiting outside, her baby now cradled in her arms. She handed me the child, and as I held that tiny, perfect life, I realized something profound: endings can also be beginnings. Daniel had tried to make me small, but in leaving him I became larger than I ever imagined. He had tried to silence me, but in breaking free I found my voice. He had tried to convince me I was nothing without him, but in truth, I was everything despite him. Now when I look back at that night in the glittering ballroom, the night my husband humiliated me in front of everyone I loved, I no longer feel the sting of shame. I feel gratitude. Because that was the night I stopped being silent. That was the night I whispered truth into the ear of a man who thought he owned me. That was the night a fire was lit, one that would burn down the cage he had built around me. And as painful as it was, I wouldn't erase it, because without that night, I might never have found the strength to leave. To anyone listening who has ever felt small, who has ever been mocked, who has ever swallowed their pain to keep the peace, you are not powerless. You are not invisible. You have a voice, even if it begins as a whisper. And one day that whisper will become a roar. If my story reached you, if it made you feel less alone, please like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories of truth and survival. And tell me your story in the comments. I promise I will listen. Because our whispers matter, and together they become thunder.